Today, continuation of chapter 17 in book 1, Rama's ego, complaining about its greed. Continuing with verse 5. Greed, by raising expectations in men, serves only to whirl them about like a vortex of the sea-swallowed marine animals. The stream of worldly greed flows like a rapid current within the rock of my body, with precipitate force and loud, resounding waves. Our minds are driven by foul greed from one place to another, as dusty, dry hay is carried away by winds, and as moisture-loving chatakra cuckoos are impelled by thirst to fly about. It is greed that destroys all the good qualities and grace that we have learned in good faith. Just like a mischievous mouse gnaws the strings of a musical instrument, we turn on the wheel of our cares like withered leaves upon water, like dry grass blown by a wind, like autumn clouds in the sky. Being overpowered by greed, we are unable to reach the goal of perfection. Like a bird entangled in a snare is kept from flight. I am so greatly burnt by the flame of greed that I doubt whether this inflammation may be relieved even by administration of nectar. Like a heated mare, greed takes me far and farther still from my place and brings me back to it again and again. Thus it hurries me up and down, to and fro, in all directions forever. The rope of greed pulls us up and casts us down like a bucket into a well. Man's greed leads him about like a bullock of burden. His avarice bends his heart as fast as the rope does the beast, and it is hard for him to break. As the hunter spreads his net to catch birds, so does our affection for friends, wives, and children stretch snares to entrap us every day. Greed, like a dark night, terrifies even the wise, blindfolds the keen-sighted, and depresses the spirit of the happiest of men. Our appetite is as heinous as a serpent, soft to feel but full of deadly poison, and bites us as soon as it is felt. It is also like a black sorceress who deludes men by her magic, then pierces him in his heart to expose him to danger afterwards. This body of ours, shattered by greed, is like a worn-out lute, fastened by arteries resembling strings, but emitting no pleasing sound. Our greed is like the long, fibered, dark, and juicy, poisonous vine called kaduka that grows in mountain caves and maddens men by its flavor. Greed is as vain, empty, fruitless, aspiring, unpleasant, and perilous as a dry twig of a tree that bears no fruit or flower, but is hurtful with its prickly point. Banality is like a mean old woman who, from the incontinence of her heart, courts the company of every man without gaining the object of her desire. Greed is an old actress who plays her various parts in the vast theater of the world in order to please the different tastes of her audience. Parsimony is like a poisonous plant growing in the wild wilderness of the world, bearing old age and infirmity as its flowers, producing our troubles as its fruits. Our churlishness resembles an aged actress who attempts a manly feat she has not the strength to perform, yet keeps up the dance without pleasing anybody. Our fleeting thoughts are as fickle as peacocks soaring over inaccessible heights under the clouds of ignorance, but ceasing to fly in the daylight of reason. Greed is like a river during the rains, rising for a time with its rolling waves, and afterwards lying low in its empty bed. Greed is as inconstant as a female bird that changes her mates at times and quits the tree that no longer bears fruit. The greedy are as unsteady as a springing monkey that never rests in any place but moves to places impassable by others and craves for fruit even when satisfied. The acts of greed are as inconstant as those of chance, both of which are ever on the alert but never attended with their sequence. Our venality is like a black bee sitting on the lotus of our hearts, where it buzzes above, below, and all about. Of all worldly evils, greed is the source of the longest sorrow. It exposes even the most secluded man to peril. Greed, like a group of clouds, is filled with a thick mist of error obstructing the light of heaven and causing a dull insensitivity. Penury, which seems to gird the breasts of worldly people with chains of gems and jewels, binds them like beasts with halters about their necks. Covetousness stretches itself long and wide and presents to us a variety of colors like a rainbow. It is equally unsubstantial and without any property as the iris, resting in vapor and vacuum and being only a shadow itself. It burns away our good qualities as fire does dry hay. It numbs our good sense as frost freezes the lotus. It grows our evils as autumn does the grass. It increases our ignorance as winter prolongs the night. Greediness is as an actress on the stage of the world. She is like a bird flying out of the nest of our houses, like a deer running about in the desert of our hearts, and like a lute making us sing and dance at its tune. Our desires, like great waves, toss us about in the ocean of our earthly cares. They bind us fast to delusion like chains bind an elephant. Like the banyan tree, they produce the roots of our regeneration, and like moonbeams, they put our budding sorrows to bloom. Greed is a jewel-encrusted box filled with misery, decrepitude, death, disorder, and disasters, like a mad drunken dance. Our wishes are sometimes as pure as light, and at other times as foul as darkness. Now they are as clear as the Milky Way, and again as obscure as thickest mist. All our bodily troubles are avoided by abstaining from greed, just as we are freed from fear of night demons as the dispersion of darkness. As long as men remain in dumbness and mental delirium, they are subject to the poisonous colic of greed. Men may get their misery by freeing themselves from anxiety. The abandonment of cares is said to be the best remedy for greed. As fish in the pond fondly grasp bait in expectation of a morsel, so the avaricious lay hold on anything, be it wood or stone or even a bit of straw. Greed like an acute pain, excites even the gravest of men to motion, just like the sunshine raises lotus blossoms above water. It is incomparable to bamboo in its it is comparable to bamboo in its length, hollowness, hard knots, and thorny prickles. And yet it is entertained with hopes that it might yield manna and pearls. It is a wonder that high-minded men have been able to cut off this most unseverable knot of greed by the glittering sword of reason, because neither the edge of a sword, nor the fire of lightning, nor the sparks of a red-hot iron are sharp enough to sever the keen greed seated in our hearts. It is like the flame of a lamp, which is bright but blackening and acutely burning at its end. Fed by only wicks, it is vivid, but never handled by anybody. Penury has the power of demeaning in a moment the best of men to the basis of straw, in spite of their wisdom, heroism, and gravity in other respects. Greed is like the great valley of the Vindhya hills, beset with deserts and impenetrable forests, terrible and full of traps laid by the hunters, filled with dust and mist. One single greed has everything in the world for its object. And though seated in the breast, it is imperceptible to all. It is like the undulating milky ocean in this fluctuating world, sweeping all things, yet regaling mankind with its odorous waves. Well, that was an excellent chapter for balancing our knowledge constructs regarding greed. Chapter 18, the denunciation of the body. This is most difficult, to let go of ownership of the physical body. Rama speaking. This body of ours that struts about on earth is only a mass of human entrails and tendons, tending to decay and disease and to torment alone. You see how these words are the antidote for the admiration everyone has for their own body. Body is like an anchor that holds you down in the ocean of samsara, literally drowning you in this ocean in every lifetime, so you cannot achieve liberation. So it's very important we balance these knowledge constructs of adoration and affection for our own physical body. That's what this chapter is going to do for us. Verse 2, it is neither quiescent nor wholly sentient, neither ignorant nor quite intelligent. Its inherent soul is a wonder, and reason makes it graceful or otherwise. The skeptic is doubtful of its inertness and exercise of intellect, and unreasonable and ignorant people are ever subject to error and illusion. The body is as easily gratified with a little as it is exhausted in an instant. Hence, there is nothing so pitiable, abject, and worthless as our bodies. The face is as frail as a fading flower. Now it shoots forth its teeth like filaments, and now it dresses itself with blooming and blushing smiles as blossoms. The body is like a tree. Its arms resemble the branches, the shoulder blades like stems. The teeth are rows of birds, the eye holes like its hollows. And the head is like a big fruit. The ears are like two woodpeckers. The fingers of both hands and feet are so many leaves of the branches. The diseases are like parasitic plants. And the acts of the body are like axes felling this tree, which is the seat of the two birds, the soul and intelligence. This shady tree of the body is only the temporary resort of a passing soul. Whether it be related or unrelated to anybody, or whether reliable or not. What man is there, O venerable fathers, who would stoop to reflect that each body is repeatedly assumed only to serve as a boat to pass over the sea of the world? Who can rely on this body with any confidence, a body like a forest full of holes abounding in hairs that resemble trees? The body, composed of flesh, nerves, and bones, resembles a drum without any musical sound. Yet I sit watching it like a cat. Our bodies are like trees growing in the forest of the world, bearing the flowers of anxiety and perforated by the worms of sorrow and misery ridden by the apish mind. The body with its smiling face appears like a good plant, bearing both good and bad fruit. But it has become home for the snake of greed and the crows of anger. Our arms are like branches of trees, and our open palms like beautiful clusters of flowers. The other limbs are like twigs and leaves, continually shaken by the breath of life. The two legs are the erect stems, and the organs are the birds of the senses. Its youthful bloom is a shade for the passing traveler of love. The hanging hairs of the head resemble long grass growing on the tree, and egoism, like a vulture, cracks the ear with its hideous shrieks. Our various desires are like the hanging roots and fibers of a fig tree that seem to support the trunk of its body, but is worn out by labor to become unpleasant. The body is the big home of its owner's ego, and therefore it is of no interest to me whether it lasts or falls. The body, linked with its limbs, like beasts of burden to labor, the home of its mistress greed, painted over by her passions, affords me no delight whatever. The abode of the body builds with its framework of backbone and ribs, and composed of cellular vessels tied together by ropes of the entrails, is no way desirable to me. This mansion of the body, tied with strings of tendons, built with the clay of blood and moisture, and plastered white with old age, is no way suited to my liking. The mind is the architect and master of this bodily dwelling, and our activities are its supports and servants. It is filled with errors and delusions which I do not like. I do not like this dwelling of the body with its bed of pleasure on one side and its childlike cries of pain on the other, and where our evil desires work like its shouting handmaids. I cannot like this body. It is like a pot of filth, full of the foulness of worldly affairs and moldering under the rust of our ignorance. It is a hovel standing on the two props of our heels, supported by the two posts of our legs. It is no lovely house where the external organs are playing their parts, while its mistress understanding sits inside with her brood of anxieties. It is a hut thatched over with the hairs on the head, decorated with the turrets of the ears, and adorned with jewels on the chest, which I do not like. This house of the body is walled about by all its members and beset by hairs growing on it like ears of grain. It has an empty space of the belly within which I do not like. The body with its nails, as those of spiders, and its entrails growling within like barking dogs, and the internal winds emitting fearful sounds, is never delightsome to me. What is this body but a passage for the ceaseless inhaling and breathing out of vital air? Its eyes are like two windows continually open and closed by the eyelids. I do not like a mansion such as this. This mansion of the body, with its formidable door of the mouth, and ever-moving bolt of the tongue, and bars of the teeth, is not pleasant to me. This house of the body, having the whitewash of ornaments on the outer skin and the machinery of the limbs in continuous motion, its restless mind burrowing its base like a mischievous mouse, is not liked by me. Sweet smiles, like shining lamps, serve to lighten this house of the body for a moment, but it is soon darkened by a cloud of melancholy. Wherefore I cannot be pleased with it. This body, the abode of diseases and subject to wrinkles and decay and all kinds of pain, is a mansion with which I'm not pleased. I do not like this wilderness of the body, infested by the bears of the senses. It is empty and hollow within, with dark grooves of entrails inside. I am unable, O chief of sages, to drag my domicile of the body, just as a weak elephant is incapable of pulling another that is stuck in a muddy pit. Of what good is affluence or royalty? This body and all its efforts to a person when the hand of time must destroy them all in a few days. Tell me, O sage, what is charming in this body that is only a composition of flesh and blood, both within and without, and frail in its nature? The body does not follow the soul upon death. Tell me, sage, what regard should the learned have for such an ungrateful thing as this? It is as unsteady as the ears of an enraged elephant, and as fickle as drops of water that trickle on their lips. I should like, therefore, to abandon it before it comes to abandon me. It is as tremulous as the leaves of a tree by a breeze. And oppressed by diseases and fluctuations of pleasure and pain. I have no relish in its pungency and bitterness. With all its food and drink forevermore, It is as tender as a leaflet and as reduced to leanness in spite of all our cares, and runs fast toward its dissolution. It is repeatedly subjected to pleasure and pain and to the succession of affluence and destitution, without being ashamed of itself, as the shameless, vulgar herd. Why nourish this body any longer, when, after its enjoyment of prosperity and exercise of authority for a length of time, it acquires no excellence nor durability? The bodies of the rich and the poor are alike subject to decay and death at their appointed times. The body lies like a tortoise in the cave of greed, amidst the ocean of the world. It remains there in the mud, in a mute and torpid state, without any effort for its liberation. Our bodies float like heaps of wood on the waves of the world, finally serving as fuel for the funeral fire, except a few which pass for human bodies in the sight of the wise. The wise have little to do with this tree of the body, which is beset by evils like harmful orchids about it, and produces the fruit of perdition. The body, like a frog, lies merged in the mire of mortality, where it perishes no sooner it is known to have lived and gone. Our bodies are as empty as fleeting gusts of wind passing over dusty ground. Nobody knows from where they come or where they go. We know not the travels of our body, and we do not know those of the winds, light, and our thoughts. They all come and go, but from where and to where we know nothing. Fie and shame on them who are so giddy with the intoxication of their error that they rely on any state or durability of their bodies. They are the best of men, O sage, whose minds are at rest with the thoughts that their ego does not exist in their bodies, and that in the end, the bodies are not theirs. Those mistaken men who have a high sense of honor and fear dishonor, but who take pleasure in the excess of their grains, are truly killers of both, of their bodies and souls. They are deceived by the delusion of ego, which, like a female evil spirit, lies hidden within the cavity of the body, with all her sorcery. Unaided, our reason is kept in bondage by the malicious fiend of false knowledge, like a slave within the prison of our bodies. It is certain that we see here is unreal, and yet it is a wonder that the mass of men are led to deception by the vile body, which has injured the cause of the soul. Our bodies are as fleeting as the drops of a waterfall. They fall off in a few days like the withered leaves of trees. They are quickly dissolved as bubbles in the ocean. Therefore, it is vain to hurl about in a whirlpool of business. I have not a moment's reliance in this body, which is ever hastening to decay. I regard its changeful delusions as a state of dreaming. Let those who have any faith in the stability of lightning, autumn clouds, and ice castles place their reliance in this body, in its inability and ability to perish. The body has outdone all things that are doomed to destruction. It is, moreover, subject to very many evils. Therefore, I value it as nothing like straw, and thereby I have attained my rest. Chapter 19, Blemishes of Boyhood. Ram speaking. One receiving his birth in the unstable ocean of this world, distributed by the waves of the turmoil of business, has to pass his boyhood in sufferings only. The attendants of infancy are a lack of strength and sense, diseases, dangers, muteness, and sensual desires, joined with longings and helplessness. Childhood is chained to fretting, crying, fits of anger, craving, and every desire of incapacity, like an elephant chained to a post. The vexations that tease the infant breast are far greater than those which trouble us in youth and old age, or disturb one in disease, danger, or at the approach of death. The acts of a boy are like those of young animals, always restless and snubbed by everybody. Hence, boyhood is more intolerable than death itself. How can boyhood be pleasing to anybody when it is a semblance of gross ignorance, full of whims and hobbies and ever subject to improper behavior? Silly boyhood is in constant dread of dangers arising at every step from fire, water, and air, which rarely causes problems in other states of life. Children are liable to very many errors in their plays and wicked frolics, and in all their wishes and attempts beyond their capabilities. Therefore, boyhood is the most dangerous stage of life. Children are engaged in false pursuits and wicked sports, and are subject to all other foolish childlessness. Hence, boyhood is fit for the rod and not for rest. All faults, misconduct, transgressions, and heartaches lie hidden in boyhood, like owls in hollow caves. Shame on those ignorant and foolish people who are falsely led to imagine boyhood as the most pleasant period of life. How can boyhood appear pleasing to anyone when the mind swings like a cradle towards every object of desire, however wrong it is deemed to be in both worlds? The minds of all living beings are ever restless, and those of young people are 10 times more at rest. The mind is naturally unsteady, and so is boyhood. Say, what can save us from that state of life when both these vagrant things combine to our destruction? The glances of women, the flashes of lightning, the flame of fire, and the ever-rolling waves have all imitated the fickleness of boyhood. Minority seems to be a twin brother to the mind. They are similar in their unsteadiness and frailty of all their purposes. All kinds of miseries, misdeeds, and improper behavior await on boyhood, as all sorts of men hang upon the rich. Children are always fond of new things, and when they fail to get them, they fall into a fainting fit, as if from the effect of poison. A boy is like a dog, is as easily tamed as he is irritated by a little, and he is as glad to lie in the dust and play with dirt. A foolish, fretful boy with his body daubed with mire, tears in his eyes, appears like a heap of dry clay soiled by the shower of rain. Children are subject to fear and voracious appetites. They are helpless, but fond of everything they have seen or heard, and equally fickle in their bodies and minds. Hence, boyhood is a source of only troubles. The foolish and helpless child becomes sad and sour when he fails to get the objects of his fancy and thwarted from the things desired. Children have much difficulty to get at the things they want, and which they can ask only by indistinct words. Hence, no one suffers so much as children. A boy is as much irritated by the eagerness of his whimsical desires as a patch of ground in the desert is parched by the summer heat. On entering school, a boy is subjected to corrections, which are as painful to him as goading and chains to an elephant. Boyhood, ever fond of toys and trifles, is continually afflicted by a great many whims and hobbies, and a variety of false fantasy. How can it be said that senseless childhood is a happy state of life, when the child is led by its ignorance to swallow everything in the world and to wish to lay hold onto the moon in the sky? Say, great sage, what difference is there between a child and a tree? Both have sensitivity, but neither is able to defend themselves from heat and cold. Children are like birds, subject to fear and hunger, and ready to fly about when impelled by them. Boyhood is the home of fear from all sides, such as the tutor, father, mother, elder brother, and elderly children, and from everybody besides. Hence, the hopeless state of childhood, full of faults and errors and addicted to sports and thoughtlessness, cannot be satisfactory to anybody. Chapter 20, the denunciation of youth. Ram continues. The boy, having passed his state of blemishes, gladly steps into youth with hopes of gaining his objects that tends only to his ruin. At this time, the unconscious youth feels the wanton inclinations of his loose mind and goes on falling from one tribulation to another. He is overcome like one subdued by the power of the elusive king Kamadeva, the goddess Desire, lying hidden in the cavity of the heart. His ungoverned mind gives rise to loose thoughts like those of voluptuous women, and these serve to beguile him like magic black collyrium eyeliner in the hands of children. Vices of the most heinous kind overcome persons of such minds in their youth and lead them to their ruin. The paths of youth lead through a maze of errors to the gate of hell. Those who have been left uncorrupted by their youth are not to be corrupted by anything else. Whoever has passed the dreadfully enchanted coast of youth, filled with various flavors and wonders, is said to be truly wise. I take no delight in our unwelcome youth, which appears to us in the form of a momentary flash of lightning, soon followed by the loud roaring of the clouds of manhood. Youth, like a rich wine, is sweet and delicious, but becomes bitter, insipid, and harmful in a short time. Hence, it is not delectable to me. Youth, appearing as a reality, is found to be a false, transient thing, as deceptive as a fairy dream by night. Hence, I like it not. It is the most charming of all things to men, but its charm is soon lost and fled. Therefore, the magic lantern show of youth is not pleasing to me. Youth is like an arrow shot, pleasant to see, but painful to feel. Hence, I do not like youth that produces heat in the blood. Youth is like a harlot, charming at first sight, but soon turns heartless. Hence, it is not to my liking. As the efforts of a dying man are all for his torment, so the exertions of the young are portentous of his destruction. Puberty advances like a dark night, spreading the shadows of destruction. It darkens the heart and mind by its hideous appearance, and intimidates even the god Shiva himself. Errors growing in youth, upsetting good sense, and giving no value to approved good manners makes copious mistakes in life. The raging fire in the hearts of the young, caused by separation from their mates, burns them down like trees in a wildfire. As a clear, sacred, and wide stream becomes muddy during rains, so does the mind of man. However clear, pure, and expanded it may be, it's polluted by its youth. It is possible for one to cross a river made terrible by its waves, but no way possible for him to get over the boisterous expanse of his youthful desires. Oh, how one's youth is worn out with the thoughts of his mistress, her swollen breasts, her beautiful face, and her sweet caresses. The wise regard a young man afflicted with the pain of soft desire as no better than a fragment of straw. Youth is the stake of haughty self-esteem, as the rack is for the immolation of the elephant, giddy with its frontal pearl. Youth is a lamentable forest, where the mind, as the root of all, gives growth to jungles of love-sick groans, sighs, and tears of sorrow. The vices of this time are like venomous snakes of the forest. Know that a person's youthful bloom resembles a blooming lotus of the lake. One is as full of affections, bad desires, and evil intents as the other is filled with bees, filaments, petals, and leaves. The new bloom of youth is the playground of anxiety and disease, which, like two birds with their black and white plumage of vice and virtue, frequent the fountain of the young man's heart. We'll end now with verse 25, resuming tomorrow with 26. Jai Gurudev.